Welcome to the Jeff Knows Inc. Entrepreneurial Show with your host, Jeff Lopes.
We are live on the Jeff Knows Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Lopes. I got a special guest from New Zealand. I'm so excited. We actually met a few months back. I did James's live on IG, and we built a relationship, and we've stayed connected. I'm so excited to have him on. You just launched your own podcast, if I'm mistaken?
That's right, Jeff. Yeah, great to see you, man. That's right.
Okay, we're going to talk about that. There's a lot of things we're going to talk about today. Say hello to everybody. James Laughlin, how are you, brother?
So good. Even better for seeing you. Great way to start my day.
I love that. I love it. I love it. So we're the time difference. It is 8 a.m. in New Zealand. So he's up bright and early to be on this podcast. I appreciate that. So many layers to James. He's a leadership. He's a leader. He coaches leadership. He is in a process, a 3-year journey of writing a book on fatherhood, which I'm very passionate about. We're going to talk about that. I'm releasing my book next week on Entrepreneurial Dads. So there's so many different layers here. So what are you currently up to, and what are you currently doing in your life? And let's talk about that, and then let the conversation flow wherever it flows. So what are you up to right now?
Well, the New Year's kicked off here in New Zealand. We've been really fortunate in the way that our government has handled COVID. So since we had a 6 or 7 week lockdown back in March, April, since then, we've been back to school. We've been back to business. The borders are shut, and there's a quarantine process for people that want to return to New Zealand. But we've been living life relatively normally. So I feel really grateful that I've been able to run my business and grow things and do things. So for me, starting the year off, it's been huge. So I'm launching a mastermind on February 22.
Awesome.
So a couple of weeks away. And it's 15 of New Zealand's top leaders, top athletes, bringing them all together. And we're spending 4 months masterminding. We'll finish up in a ski town called Queenstown, which is just south of where I live.
Yeah.
And the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, he's going to come in and join us for that and mastermind with us. So that's been taking up a lot of my focus, along with the launch of the podcast.
So when did this all start? This whole process, this mastermind? You're capping it off on these 15 individuals.
Yes.
Very, very cool. That's interesting. So when a lot of people create masterminds, obviously they're running it as a business. Are you running this as a business, or are you running this as almost like a networking tool for yourself to grow yourself as a brand?
It's definitely as a business, but it will obviously benefit everyone that's part of it as well.
That is awesome. That is awesome. So this whole process, when did you put this whole thought process into action to get this all launched?
It's so interesting. So I'd been thinking about this probably for like 18 months. Like, oh, that'd be really cool to bring all these different people that I'm coaching one-to-one and people that I want to connect with, bring them together, see where they're going, see where I can like be the glue for them and help facilitate great connections and joint ventures. So I thought about it. And then last December, so just 2020 December, I was like, you know what? I need to stop thinking and start doing. I was like, okay, let's hit the ground. Let's make some phone calls. Let's set a date. And yeah, it's only about 2 months in the making in terms of the time that I put into it, but we're ready to go. We're ready to kick off.
I love it. Do you have any partners in this, or you're the mastermind behind this all?
Yeah, I'm running the whole show. It's pretty exciting, pretty daunting at the same time.
No, daunting is a good thing. Daunting is a challenge, and anything that anytime you're challenging yourself, you're growing, you're developing, and you're hitting expectations of yourself, which I appreciate, right? What is your long-term goal with this mastermind? Is this something you want to ongoingly run? Like, what's your mindset with it?
You know what? I really would like to run it long-term. I've done zero advertising, zero marketing. Nobody would have seen anything on Instagram, LinkedIn. I mean, I post a lot on social media, but nobody would have seen anything. It was all word of mouth. And I thought, this is the true test. Can I get 15 people paying a high value ticket number to come along to this mastermind without driving all these ads and all this marketing? And I thought, if this is truly worth what it is and there's value there, people are going to come to it through word of mouth. And that's exactly how I've grown it. So next year, when COVID settles, I'd like to open it up and invite international guests in as well. So people can, from anywhere, come and be a part of this mastermind. So this year, New Zealand only, but the plan is to go global and grow it.
I love it. So your podcast, you just launched it. How many episodes have you released already?
I've got 6 episodes out now.
Okay, awesome. When did this venture come into fruition in your mind?
Oh my goodness. So I've been, again, probably 3-4 years thinking about this podcast, and I've been connecting with these great people and doing video interviews with former, world leaders and athletes. Like, this would be cool to put this in a podcast. but I never got around to it. You know, dad life and business life all got busy.
Yeah.
So I said, you know, in about October last year, I was like, look, I need to create a podcast. Why do I need to do it? Because I want to impact more lives. I want to connect with more great people. I want to showcase these amazing guests.
Yeah.
So I kicked it off at the start of the year. I was like, let's do it. January, let's do this. And I'm committed to one a week. So I do one interview, and then the next week I do a solo cast where it's just me, coaching and training. Next one's back to an interview, and just keep rotating like that.
I love it. I love it. I love it. How quickly how advanced are you pre-recording your guests?
Not so I was getting like really excited and getting a bunch of guests lined up, but I started to realize the world changes so quick, and I've got to be relevant. So I can't record something in January and then put it out in May. So I'm just like a month ahead of myself, like 4 weeks out, and that's it.
Yeah.
What about you?
I'm so originally when I started this podcast, I started the first 4 episodes just me laying it out, and then I brought in 2 guests, and then our guests went like higher volume. So what I was doing it 6-minute segues on Wednesday. So I was doing call it a hump day lesson. Every Wednesday I was doing a 6 to 10 minute lesson. So just for the algorithm to have 2 podcasts a week, and then on Mondays I release my hour like some of my podcasts. Like I just released a podcast for Nick Kumalatis the other day, which is an hour and 45 minutes. We had this epic conversation, which is a big guest. So it's the problem is getting people to listen for that long. You know, their attention spans, right? So what I do is I do my long and then my short. But the only problem is I started getting so many good guests. And then all of a sudden my 6-minute hump day became a full lesson. So now we're running 2 full episodes a week. And I'm still trying to keep up because I'm still always like 4 or 5 weeks ahead of time.
Good on you. That's epic.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, I just had Tim Story last week. I had John Lee the week before. And these are people with like 5, 6, like massive followings, big guests. And it's getting to the point where I'm getting so comfortable with it that it's just striving. We're building these relationships. And they're just growing and growing. I've had some massive names on our podcast, and you just, once you're done, you start building connection with them, and now you're connected to them, and they're opening their database and saying, hey, here's my network. Is anybody you want to bring on your podcast? So it just opens up, right? So it's a fun thing. Originally, when I started this, I'm going to ask you this: when I started my podcast, I was very successful business-wise. I had done well. My companies had grown. I've been at it for 25 years. I was doing really well financially, but I did this podcast for one purpose. I didn't want to financially make any money on it. I had a very, very, very strict line I was going to follow for this podcast. The podcast had 2 purposes. One, to brand myself, which I never branded myself before. And second, the network. Yeah. So both have been checked off. And it's created this network where my social media has gone from 300 to 26,000 almost. Like it's been all through the podcast. And so I'm very lucky that I've had a lot of incredible guests that have helped push it. But I've also learned very quickly that it's not even the big, I was just talking to somebody this morning about this. It's not, and you're going to learn this, and I want you to learn this. It's not the biggest names. It's the best stories.
Yeah. I
had a gentleman on from Nigeria. Outside Nigeria, he might not have a following, but I just connected on IG. We became friends, and I was like, I'm going to bring him on my podcast. I asked him to be on my podcast, brought him on my podcast. Within 48 hours, we were ranked in Nigeria. You know, when you get Chartables, you'll get a Chartable. There's a website called Chartable to see where you're ranking, world ranking. In Nigeria, for almost 2 weeks, we're the #1 business podcast.
Wow.
And we got, in a week and a half, off his podcast alone, in a week and a half, 28,000 downloads.
That's incredible.
Which is incredible. And then you get people that have 3 million followers, but they don't promote it. They don't care about it. They just do their tours, and you get no following from it. So you have to understand that audience loves stories. I've had another gentleman on, not a big following, but he had such an incredible story, and his podcast has been on now for maybe 5 months. I had it on, but every week I go back, and every week I get 15, 20 new downloads, and it's just steadily growing. He just hit 30-something thousand downloads, but it's been, I could see his by the end of 2020 being over 100,000, because it's just steadily growing. So it's not sometimes the best guess. It's great to have big names, but those are not the ones that are going to bring the downloads and bring the audience.
Makes sense.
So that's one thing you're going to learn very quickly is mixing in with great stories and having those great stories. So through your experience so far with your podcast, have you had any epic stories or anything that you're just like, wow, this is awesome, or this is such a great experience so far?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been amazing. So the guests I've had so far have been mind-blowingly interesting and intriguing. So
Yeah.
most recent guest was Craig Clemens. So he's an incredible guy from LA.
Yeah.
Went to school, kind of got through school, didn't love school, went to college, dropped out of college, was partying like a rock star, drinking it up, and then discovered this mentor, a marketing mentor. And it was old school, like print, like old school copy, right? And so he started like refining it, doing the work.
Yeah.
And then he went from college dropout to making over $1 billion in sales. And
wow.
Incredible story on how he got there. He got kidnapped in the Ukraine. Like, his story is insanely awesome.
Yeah.
So I think it is all about the story. And he actually was saying exactly what you're talking about, is that people don't give a damn about your story unless they can see themselves in your story and how that story can help them move forward and create a solution for a problem that they've got.
Yeah, 100%. I think that even goes to print, where a lot of individuals that write books, and we're going to talk about you writing your book right now. A lot of individuals, they're when they write a book, they're writing a book on themselves as a bio. But people don't care about your bio. People want a bio. They want to learn lessons from it. So my book that I'm releasing is very short, just quick read, but it's 7 lessons through my stories. So it's learning how to turn your story into something valuable, that somebody's going to be able to take with it, which I appreciate. So your book journey, it's been 3 years. We talked about it the other day and all this stuff. It's been a long journey. How far are you, and when are you ready to say let's get this road on the let's get this car on the road kind of thing?
Great question. So when I became a father, so 2016, everything changed for me. So I was a competitive drummer, and from a young age, that was my passion. I traveled the world. I was competing and became a world champion at, I think, 13, and went on to win another 6 world titles across a 10-year period. So that was my passion. That's what I did. It took up most of my time. I taught that during the day. I had a retail business selling all over Australasia, drumming products. I was then running rehearsals and events in the evenings. So when my son came along, I looked him in the eye and I was like, enough's enough. No way. Like, I need to be here for this dude. Like, I've had my fun. I can still have fun in different ways, but I can't be out 5 nights a week and doing 90-hour work weeks. This is ridiculous. Yeah. So I decided to change and pivot. And so I did that. I stepped back. I retired from competing, felt great about it, and was at peace with it right away. It was the right decision. And whilst I did that, I was still working at a private school here in Christchurch, New Zealand. And whether you guys know it or not, but New Zealand has the highest teenage suicide rate in the OECD.
No.
And New Zealand is like pictured as this beautiful, pure, clean, beautiful place, which it is. Yeah. But it also has a dark undercurrent. And, you know, we've got this massive high teenage suicide rate. So I always knew that, but I wasn't like, it wasn't really close to home. So I was working at this school for 14 years. And over that period, several of the students actually committed suicide. And so it was a lot closer to home. I was like, well, this is awful. Like, this can't be right. And I think back to Ireland, where I grew up, we didn't have suicide rates like that at all. So I started thinking more, and I like to create think time and journal and notes. And I was like, you know what? I need to look into this. Like, nobody's talking about this. When it happens, we brush it under the carpet. It's not good for the school brand. It's not good for the community. Like, that's the wrong approach. We need to be talking about this. So started asking some questions to people in the community, and they started talking a bit. I was like, yeah, this is not good enough. I was like, I've got some friends in the All Blacks. So the All Blacks are our national rugby team. They are multiple time world champions, awesome people, really high performers. So I thought, you know what? I want to talk to them about it. They'll open up, they're open. And they were amazing. So I got chatting to them, and they were dads. And I discovered actually that the statistics were showing that these suicide rates were related to fatherhood, right? Not all of them, but a lot of the kids, particularly boys, because boys are 6 times more likely than girls to do that. The boys that had absent fathers or no fathers were much more likely to have these issues and to commit suicide. So I thought, well, that's interesting. We also have one of the highest domestic violence rates and child mortality rates on the planet. We're right up there with Mexico. So I said, this is weird. Why do we have those statistics? This is beautiful New Zealand. I moved here away from Northern Ireland where there was all that conflict. I moved here because it's a beautiful, peaceful country. Well, actually, you don't know what goes on behind people's walls, right? Within the four walls of someone's home, you have no idea.
I love that. Yeah.
So that was a big thing I discovered. It was like fathers are the answer to a brighter future. They really are. If we can help the next generation of fathers be more open, be more vulnerable, be more empathic, embrace their feminine side, learn how to take their physical like anger, which we build this up, take it to the gym, take it to the treadmill, like look at ways of coping rather than going to the bottle or going to drugs or going to gangs. We can really shape the next generation, and therefore we can hit this teenage suicide on the head. It might take a couple of generations.
Yeah.
But I thought, you know what, I need to share a story of people who are living it and walking the walk. People who are high performers, who are stressed out, who have lots on their plate, who have the media all over them, but they're still really great dads. So I started with some of the All Blacks and started interviewing them. I thought, I need to put this into a book. This would be a great book. And then I got to interview the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, and then Ndaba Mandela, who's Nelson Mandela's grandson, ambassador for the United Nations. It just started going all over the place. It was amazing. So the book is like 3/4 done, and I kept wanting to hang out. The one person I wanted to interview was Barack Obama, and I've had a few potential ins to try and connect with him, but it's very difficult. So I'm thinking I got to publish, and second edition, he can be a part of it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I mean, you're speaking to something that you're aware that I'm very passionate about, and something that I spent the last 12 years with my son through his journey and getting him to where he is right now. And it's not only through his journey. I opened myself and allowed myself to learn parenting, and I studied parenting, and I made it a purpose in my life, and not only to be present, but to be present in a loving, open way that I'm full of lessons, and being able to resonate those lessons with my children and make them understand that, like, I'm very open with my children, and there's certain things I do, James, is if I accomplish something, I'm the first to say, hey guys, come here, come see what dad did. I'm proud as shit I did this, and I want you guys to see this. And I'm not bragging. I'm doing this because I want you guys to understand what hard work does. Mm-hmm. I lead by example. When I tell them to work out, I'm there working out with them. If I tell them to do anything, and we talked about this, like even certain things with fear, like once a month, and I think we talked about this before, once a month, as a family, we find something that our kids have a fear of, whether it's public speaking, and we do it all together. So it's being able to lead as a leader and not a coach. And this is one thing, and I use this strategy towards business, towards everything in life. I want to be the captain of the team, not the coach of the team. Because a coach gives directions. I want to be the guy with the C on the shirt that's in the ditches leading the way, that they're following behind me, learning from me, and growing in that mindset that I could do that. So that's one thing is a lot of dads, they're great coaches. They're great to say, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, but they're not doing it or living it themselves.
100%.
And I appreciate that. And it's something that I'm very passionate about. And I was having this conversation, and I know this is pure off topic, but I was having this conversation this morning where in life, we all make decisions, and we all make our own decisions. And something will trigger that decision. That decision will alter who we are as an individual, as a person, the rest of our lives. And I was having this conversation this morning with the gentleman that's going on to 15 years of sobriety, and he knows me, and we're just talking. And I don't drink. I might have half a glass of rosé, like a little girl, twice a year or something like that. But that was by choice. When my mom grew up in an alcoholic family. Her father, which is my grandfather, was a massive alcoholic. He had 11 brothers, one sister. Those 11 brothers, 7 of them all died alcoholics. Wow. So when my mom was a little girl, 7, 8 years old, her parents back in Europe, people didn't separate. They stuck together. They actually separated. Her mom took off and left her with her abusive alcoholic father. So my mom went from house to house, and she grew up watching her cousins, her uncle. It was like in the bloodline, all alcoholics. So when I was 16, 17, you're a kid, you're out drinking, you're having fun, you're learning, you're experimenting. I remember coming home one day and seeing my mom real sad. And I was like 17, maybe 17, turning 18. And for the first time she broke up and gave me this and made me understand what she was feeling, that her fear and her basic anxiety was having the opportunity to see me follow up in her father's steps and being alcoholic and having that bloodline where it could be hereditary. Like, are you going to follow that path? And that was her biggest fear, seeing me, even though I wasn't alcohol, I was as a kid playing around. But that just instantly triggered me. And from that day on, I haven't drank. And like I said, I'll have a little glass of wine, and I don't drink. And it's got to the point where I don't. It's if I even taste the beer, I don't like the taste of it. So there's certain things in life that'll trigger people to alter their course in life. So I appreciate how you're saying that about dads, because the example that each father is leading is going to alter or change each generation going forward, right?
100%.
So okay, first off, you have, how many children? You have one
little boy.
One little boy. He's 3, you said?
He's 4, about to turn 5 in May.
4 to 5 in May. So he's a little guy still. And I see through IG, you're very active in his life. So I appreciate that. When he was born, how did that, and obviously you gave me a little brief understanding, but how did that change your life in the mindset where did you look at like even future savings and future prospects? Like, where did it alter you as a father? And I always like hearing that.
Yeah, it was instant, like literally. So I remember we're at the hospital and things weren't going quite so smoothly. And in the end, an emergency button had to be hit. All the surgeons rushed in, rushed Lisa away to the operating theater. And I was like in shock. So I got to go in and met this little dude instantly. And they have the APGAR test. I'm not sure if they have this APGAR test in Canada where they test them for all their vitals when they're born.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And he didn't perform where they wanted him to perform. So I was like, whoa, this is a bit scary. So they did it again like a minute later, and he performed brilliantly. And then I got to stand above him and hold him and look in his little eyes. And I said, I love you, Finn. And he looked back up at me, and I thought, he's been hearing, because I used to speak to him when he was in the womb, like every day. I was like, he knows the voice. And held him on my chest. So, you know, Lisa was doing her thing and being cared for. And I got to hold him on my chest, skin to skin. I was like, this is it. Like, today's the day where I change my focus from me, change my focus from all the big goals and holidays and all these things that have been just about me and my partner. I thought, you know what, this is about him. This is about me stepping into my dad's shoes and my granddad. I was very fortunate to have an amazing dad, amazing granddad, and think, okay, it's my duty. I've got to continue this lineage. And I've been fully invested right from the start. Started thinking about his education. So put together a little investment account for him.
Yeah.
Put some dollars in there, and every week it just keeps going in. So when he's 18, he'll be looked after. And just little simple things like the day he was born, I took a moment, and I don't drink. I've been alcohol free for 10 months now. Somebody set me a challenge. I was like, I'll do that. An Irishman doing an alcohol free challenge is always always a good one. But on the day he was born, I went down to Whiskey Galore. My friend owns this beautiful whiskey shop, and got Finn a bottle of whiskey and sat down and wrote a big letter to Finn and telling him how I felt about him. Put it together, put it away. Every year on his birthday, I go and buy a bottle of whiskey, a very nice bottle that's going to be worth an investment for the future. And I write him a letter each year, and I put photos in from the whole year. So I go back through my iPhone, look at my album, and I write on the back of each photo what we were doing and what the emotions were and how proud I was, and some of the difficult challenges I've had in my last year and how I've traversed them, and my hopes for him. And so my plan is, and I've got them in the safe here, all the letters. My hope is that when he's 30, hopefully I'll still be alive. I'll be 60, and he can sit down and open up the first letter. And each year thereafter, he can open up a letter so he can see what I wrote when he was 1 and when he was 2. So for me, I just want to connect with him on a really deep level and know him to know that I really care. I'm always going to be there, that I'm not a saint. You know, I've screwed up and I've made mistakes, and I try to be the best person I can be. And every year I'm learning and growing, and I just want him to know he doesn't have to feel like he has to be perfect, and, you know, progress is better than perfection.
I love that. I love that. And that's something where as dads, no one's going to be ever perfect. And that's just reality, right? Anything we're doing, we're always learning and we're always progressing. And as long as we have that understanding, we're always learning and we're always progressing, we're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
And being vulnerable to understand that, right? You're always, as dads, there's different sides of us as mentors. There's direct and indirect. And I think a lot of dads do not take that moment, and I fall in that category, which I think most of us do, is sometimes you don't understand the indirect mentoring and how your children are paying attention to it.
Mm.
And I'll give you an example of something that just happened to me recently. And we talked before, so I don't know what stories I've told you, but it was a few months ago. I'm very all about, from day one, my son owing who he is. So my son went from, you know the story, but he went from wheelchair to balancing to AFO's braces. He was supposed to be in braces. He was 19. By 12th birthday, I had him out of his braces, and now he's literally doing 5K in less than 40 minutes right now. I could barely keep up with him, and he's 12. And through this whole journey, it's been a journey of both of us, and I've put my time in. I mean, as a dad, I am so proud of the hours I put into my son. I've put in some days 10, 15 hours doing what I had to do, driving around therapies and stretching him and working with, but it's all for a purpose, because I never want, and I want dads to understand this, if there's a situation in your life that you need or have the opportunity to make better, do not live with fucking regrets. And I'm swearing there, but don't live with fucking regrets. Because that was my biggest thing I told myself when my son was born. When the doctors handed a paper saying that he was diagnosed with CP, cerebral palsy, and he was going to be confined to a wheelchair his whole life, I grabbed those papers and I fucking threw them out. And I said, no doctor's going to pretty much dictate my son's future. And in my head, I didn't know if that would happen, but in my head, I knew I did not want to be in my 50s looking at my son at when he was in his mid-teens or early 20s and be there and be like, I could have done this differently, and that could have altered his life, and why the fuck did I not do it? And I told myself from day one I was going to do everything I possibly can, James. I don't give a shit what I had to sacrifice or what money or whatever. I would do what I had to do to give him the best opportunity to be at his highest level. And that's what I did. And I've done that from day one, and I'll continue doing that. And as dads, you're always teaching your children as many good lessons you can, but it's the indirect mentoring you have to be very careful with. I'll give this little example. So my son plays baseball, and he plays competitive baseball. And he's a really, really good little lefty. He's a lefty pitcher. So when he was born, as part of his brain, his right side of his body had no motion to it. So we had to teach him motion. So he's actually a right-handed, but he learned how to do everything with his left. So he's a left-handed pitcher, 12 years old. He throws the ball like 55 miles an hour, 40, 54, 50 miles, which is incredible for his size. So we're at this training facility, and he was training, and we're just throwing the ball around, and he's pitching, and he's hitting he was like 53, 54, I was so happy. And we had a radar gun on him, and we're filming, and these two high school kids came in. And don't play baseball, but this is a really high level facility. But they're just there to do the batting cages, play around and all that stuff. So they were hitting around, and they came up to me, sir, like, you have the radar gun. Like, can we use it? We want to see how hard we throw. I'm like, yeah, of course, take it. We were done. They took it, they played around. So when they're done, they came back and they're like, and I'm like, how'd you guys do? And they're like 15, 16. My son's just barely 12 then. He's just 12. Yeah, well, he always was 12. And they're like, oh, we hit 38, and the other one hit 41. And I turn around and like, that little guy's hitting 54 miles an hour. And I just said that, but listen to this story. So I just said that, put the gun away, got in the car. My son was so quiet. I'm like, what's wrong, T? We're driving home. He's like, Dad, I really got to talk to you about something. And I go, what's wrong? And he goes, looked at me. He's like, you've taught me from as long as I can remember to never compare myself to somebody, never compare others to me, and never talk down to people or make them feel inferior. And I'm like, what? I couldn't click in my head what he was talking about. He's like, by you comparing those boys to me, you made them feel inferior, and you made them not feel good about themselves. And I think that was wrong. And I stood there, James, and I was just like, whoa. I was like speechless driving home. I was like, I can't believe you just said this to me. And I looked at him, I'm like, you're 1,000% right. And I apologize. And I promise I'll put more thought into something like that again, and I won't do that again. That's and amazing. I thanked him for saying that. And I go, you're teaching me a lesson. I appreciate that. But it's just, it's crazy. As your son gets older, those little things that you might do when you think he's not looking are impacting him.
That's amazing. I love that. It is the simple things. Like the other day, he had his feet up on as we were sitting eating, and he had his little snack and he had his feet up. And I was like, dude, no. Feet down. We don't put our feet up on things. And literally about an hour later, watching TV.
You
I
got your
pop
feet
my
up.
feet up and say, "Oi, Dad, we don't put our feet up on things."
I love it. I love
You're
it.
right.
I love it. I love it. And
So,
one thing I'm very precise about is teaching them to respect others. And I go out of my way to teach that. I mean, since my kids were like 2 years old, when they go to a mall, I make them wait back and hold the door for somebody intentionally. Or I make them smile at people. I'll be in line and there'll be somebody in the grocery store and I'll turn around like, hey, that person looking at you, give them a big smile. Like I'll make sure they do that because one, it builds confidence. Two, they understand and appreciate being kind to people. And those are all things. So there's so many lessons as a dad. I think a lot of fathers don't take the incentive or the initiative to do these little things that make such a huge difference.
I agree with you. And I think, Jeff, the hard thing is that, manners for me is a big thing. And I think manners often portrays kindness as well. When you can say to someone, thank you and please, it's really special for me. And so some fathers think, okay, well, I'll reinforce that once and, they should listen and roll with it. But as a dad, it's like, you've literally got to say the same thing every single day for a number of years. Yeah. Repetitions, right? As a dad, it's like, you can't put one rep in and expect that child to run with it.
No.
And often I feel like when I'm repeating the manners thing and I'm repeating the values thing to Finn, I'm actually parenting myself a little bit at the same time, like James, remember?
You're learning 100%.
Totally.
100%. And the minute you realize and appreciate that, it's just going to open up your awareness to everything else around you.
I'm a rookie, man. I'm learning every day.
Listen to me. I got a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old and I'm learning every day. And I love your story too, because this is why, another thing why I'm focused on helping father entrepreneurs is because when I started the podcast, that was not my original attention. My intention was to write a book on father entrepreneurs and helping them. But when I started interviewing all these young, successful entrepreneurs, they all had the same story. They came from broken homes and this is their battle back and they had to prove their dad wrong. And I was like, seriously, this is, you have to have this brutal story to be successful. I'm like, and then when I was on a couple of podcasts and I'm talking about fatherhood and they're like, and I would have people interview me like, oh, like your dad, is there anything he did wrong to make you be motivated? And I'm like, no, my dad was 9 to 5, hardworking, blue collar that was there at every single event that didn't understood the value, how money was valued by time. When he wasn't even an entrepreneur, he was just a blue collar worker, but he understood that from a very young age. And my father was always there. I had this great childhood. We didn't have a lot. Like literally, I'm going to give you a little story, James. Like for Christmas, this is how financially tight my parents were for Christmas. We got gifts twice a year, our birthday and our Christmas. Not like my kids now, where it's like my aunt, my sister, and my parents, and everybody around. Every time they see them, they're giving them something. So they're giving gifts like every week. You know how it is, right?
Yep.
But growing up, it was twice a year. You got your Christmas and your birthday gift. You got 1 or 2 gifts each time, and that was it for the year. And I remember my parents in Toronto, Canada, there was this big warehouse. And me, my sister, my mom and dad, about 2 weeks before Christmas, would drive to this big warehouse. And it only took me years later to realize what the hell this actually was when I was a kid. And you'd walk in, kids weren't allowed. So they'd put you into a room. And it was all full of kids, all sitting in chairs. And the parents were given these garbage bags. And they would walk in, spend an hour, come out with these garbage bags. We'd be like, what are you doing? Oh, we're buying stuff. My parents would lie to me. They put it in the trunk. And then the night before Christmas, they take the stuff out of the trunk, they wrap it, put it under the tree. Now that was a toy warehouse for toys that were 2, 3, 4 years old on clearance because my parents couldn't afford that. My friends would all have all the newest things. But I could tell you, James, I never, ever felt like I didn't have anything because my parents showed me so much love that materialistic items didn't mean shit to me as a kid. I felt like I always had everything. I never felt like I missed anything, even though I probably had less than a quarter than any of my friends. So it's understanding that as a parent now, I sit back and I appreciate my parents every day more and more because, and I'm so fortunate they're still with us, that they did everything they could to provide me as much love as they could to make me feel fulfilled. And I think that's a huge, huge, huge thing is teaching your kids as much love and showing them as much love as you possibly can because the gifts come and go. They don't give a shit. Your kids don't care about gifts. Totally. You look at your son, you give him a gift. Is he going to play with it for a week and he's done?
No, it's like a day and it's done.
Exactly. But when he's happy that you are spending the time to give it to him. You're rewarding him. It's that subconscious mind that my dad appreciates me. He's giving me something to award me. That's his subconscious mind. That's the happiness. He's happy at that moment because he's with you.
100%. I've got a reminder on my phone, and people are like, why do you need to remind yourself of this? But I do. And I think it's important. Every day it goes off just before I go to pick Finn up from school. So the best gift you can give Finn is your love. And by love, that's like time spent. So each day I'm like, what do you want to do today? And so some days I'm like, let's go and get gelato, or let's go on the gondola, or let's go to the park and kick the football. Or Dad, can we just go home and just go to my bedroom and play with all my toys together? I was like, yeah, let's do it. So it's just time. And yes, sometimes when we go to the mall and he's in the big warehouse, he'll see something, he'll, want to have a gift.
Yeah. That's kids, right?
Totally. But it's, I think presence and presents are two different things, right? So being present for them is so much more important than providing them with presents and gifts.
I love that. Are you planning on any more additions to the family soon?
No additions.
So you're one and done.
Yes. So Lisa and I, so Finn's mom, we parted about just over a year ago.
Oh, you have? I apologize.
No, not at all. No, it's something I'm very open to chat about, and Lisa would be too. So I would say the best way to say it would be we consciously uncoupled, and we're still best mates. We co-parent like absolute badasses. If Lisa's listening, hello, Lisa. Lisa's from Canada, actually, from your part of the world. She's on the other coast, so Vancouver.
Yeah.
And that's where we met. And so, not this Christmas past, but 2019 Christmas, we'd parted, but we still went back to Canada, and I got to spend time with her family and got to see Finn interact with his Canadian family. So we parted on beautiful terms. We still see each other lots. And if you're going to co-parent, I think this is the way to do it. And we've grown in different directions. And we just want to make sure that little Finn, he benefits from great parenting. Whether we're living in the same house or not, he can see that we still love each other, we respect each other, we get each other a gift on birthdays and Christmas and all that kind of stuff, because it's important for him to see that things can still function. My parents divorced when I was probably anywhere between 11 and 13. It's kind of foggy, but and they don't talk and they don't speak and they won't be in the same events together. And that's tough, that's tough on me, and it's tough on them, and it's tough on they've got grandkids. I don't want that for Finn. Not at all. So yeah, I want him to have a harmonious family.
I appreciate that. And sometimes staying together is actually a negative thing for the child. And I think a lot of people sometimes stay together for their children. And if anything, they're putting them in this toxic environment, and it's not a positive outcome. So being able to understand where you best suit and where you best could contribute as a parent and doing it separately is a lot more beneficial to Finn. And I appreciate you guys having that understanding. And I love the word you said, respect, because I think that's one of the most important things to teach children is respect, self-respect, and obviously showing, and how you teach self-respect is obviously showing it to each other as parents. So I love that part of it. Yeah. So you're parenting, how is that split time-wise between you and Lisa?
Lisa works at a private school, so she's the matron, like a manager of a boarding house. So it can be kind of like her schedule's all over the place. So roughly it's about 50-50. During her peak times when it's crazy, it could be 60-40, where I spend a little bit more time with him during term time. But then when it's holidays, it's 50-50. And we juggle it, and if stuff comes up for me, I know that, Lisa will support, and vice versa. When stuff comes up for her, my partner and I will support her as well. So it all works out.
I love it. So let's get into business wise, coaching wise. When did you start your journey with coaching?
So I started unofficially, like pro bono, about 5-6 years ago, working with people. So as a drummer, as a youngster, I'd started researching psychology and how it could help me perform better, and dealing with pressure and nerves, and reading the Tony Robbins material as a kid. I just loved it. And so, I was getting towards the end of my competitive career, and I thought, well, actually, I'm really enjoying this whole idea of like helping others overcome obstacles and fears. So I just started chatting to people and connecting and opening up. I thought, wow, this coaching thing's really fulfilling. Yeah. But I started looking into, okay, maybe I should get myself a coach. And there was a couple of incidences that happened that forced me to go out and look into coaching. One was the Christchurch earthquake, where we had a massive earthquake, and then we had about 3,000-4,000 aftershocks. And every aftershock that comes, you're like, is that another big one? Like, you just don't know. So I developed somewhat of a PTSD and was on edge, drinking a lot, sleeping in, not being very productive. So I thought, hey, this is my opportunity. I'll go get a coach. The coach was amazing. They were really well trained. They helped me see things differently, move forward. And it was like a life-changing experience. And I got through and I thought, okay, I'm good now. I don't need any more coaching. And then about 3 years later, Lisa, so Finn's mum, and I were trying to fall pregnant. And we did. And then went for the 12-week scan and there was no heartbeat. And so I took that really hard. That was so, I couldn't handle it. I was emotionally crippled, and I thought, well, I need to get some coaching again. I sat in that kind of misery for a couple of weeks. I thought, nah, I need to get some support. So went back to coaching. And again, after 6 to 12 weeks, I was like, wow, I'm back to my old self. It's like, there's something to this. So I looked into coaching and I realized for $25 on Google, you can get a certificate. I thought, that's not me. So I looked at how else can we do it? So the ICF is the International Coaching Federation. They have really structured coaching and you can go and learn how it's done. And so that's what I want to do. It's a bigger investment, but looks like it's very, very well done. It's the gold standard. So I went through that and learned how to do it and learned why it works and how to implement.
Which platform did you use for that?
So it's called Coach Masters, and it's based here in New Zealand. They're ICF accredited, and it was transformational coaching.
Okay.
And so I just loved it. It was like great. I met some great people, and I thought, well, I'm going to start doing some pro bono work with people. So I did, and I started getting some results. Like, wow, this is incredible. So I started like transitioning away from my role as a drumming teacher and owning a retail shop over towards coaching, and it became more obvious that leaders and executives, CEOs, they wanted this as a service. Wow, I could really build this. And so about 2 years ago, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this. And so I just started ramping it up and marketing and building an audience. And it's been amazing. It's been an incredible journey.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love how you had, obviously your schooling had a purpose there. And it's, I don't know if we talked about this, but when the pandemic hit, I've been coaching. Even though I run my companies, my corps and stuff, I've been coaching for a little over 3 years. I've coached 64 entrepreneurs. Did we talk about this?
That's amazing.
So I've never charged a penny.
Amazing.
I've taken guys from ground zero to 7-8 figures. And I have literally videos and videos, testimonies I've never even used, but I've never charged anything. And then when the pandemic hit, I was like, this is something I really have a lot of passion about. And that was where the father and all this stuff. And then that's when I took a pen to paper and I started putting everything together, writing the book. I started the podcast, and in the process, I got certified as NLP through the same federation. I got NLP and I got my coaching certification through the ICF as well. So I got all my certifications, all that stuff. And I thought I was doing it for so long. I understood that a certificate really doesn't really mean nothing. To me, it was just more showing a credibility. You know, it is, right? So somebody's with you and you have that certification, they have the credibility, but I think a lot of the coaching, like you said, as you become more and more involved, you start to learn your own tactics, you start to learn your own methods, and you become very refined on how you approach things and how you work with people. So through the whole certification, I'll be honest, there's probably maybe about out of the NLP, there's so many different aspects of NLP. I probably only taken maybe about 5 of them and out of those 5, it's funny that I actually had a mentor when I was 19 years old. When I was 19, I ran a consulting company in the fitness industry. And at 19, I was standing on stage with like 1,000 people teaching sales. And I had a mentor that taught me sales. And he's taught me how to build rapport, how to build commonality. He was going through these things 25 years ago. And he didn't know nothing about NLP. And then it was funny because I started taking NLP and all of a sudden they were talking about commonalities, building rapports, reframing your mind. And that was everything this guy taught me. It was just like this light, like, I remember this all. And it was able to readapt it into what I do. And there's a lot of things I do on a regular basis that I didn't even think I was doing or had any relation to NLP, but now that I sit there and reflect on them, like I was always in mind, and I've always told people, it's like, you don't got to pick up your kids from school. You get to pick up your kids from school. You don't have to be home for dinner. You get to be home for dinner. Like little things like that, reframing how you use words and how you talk is going to just change the outcome of that conversation. And NLP is very, very precise to that. If you know to use it properly, it's really, really good. So I appreciate that you went out of your way, because it's pretty easy to do a $25 certificate and just say do it, which a lot of people do. And you know, one thing, James, is I was having this actually conversation with, right before I got on with you, I was talking to somebody on the phone, and we were having this conversation about coaches. And I find there's so many coaches on social media that never lived life. They've never lived life. They're in their 20s, and it's a coach trying to sell a coach, trying to sell another coach, trying to sell, and this is rabbit hole. And they're all trying to push each other. They're all trying to sell each other. They're all trying to DM each other.
Coaching coaches.
But that's what it is.
How to build a platform. You're right. It's all about sales. And I get these requests constantly on LinkedIn and stuff, and it says such and such coach, and I'm like, decline. Such and such coach, or helping to build coaches to 6-figure plus. I'm like, decline. It's like there's so much sales, and that's one thing I've prided myself in. Is like, you know what? I don't run paid ads. I've never done that. I don't run any kind of ads to get one-to-one clients. It's like, if I can do this and I bring value, it'll go by word of mouth. Like if that person likes it, they'll talk to one of their CEO friends and be like, hey, I had a session with James and I'm loving it. Like, that's how my business is built. And I take pride in that, because you walk the walk of reality, rather than I've went to a course, learned the theory, and I can regurgitate the theory. But like you just said, you actually were living it like many years ago and learning those strategies without even knowing it. And to me, you can tell the difference between a coach who's reading from a script. And let me say, there's some massive coaching brand names out there that are probably some of the top brand names.
And they read off
they have coaches that work for them, and they're working from scripts. I get people coming from those people who are billionaires, these amazing.
Oh, I know that. We were having this conversation about them, and they're very robotic and they're very fake.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to name them on the live podcast, but when we get off, we'll name them. But there's a few of them. Totally. We're having this conversation this morning about this. That is just, I was sitting there, I'm like, and I was having this conversation with, I actually recorded another podcast earlier today. And we were having this conversation, and I said to him, I go, when we get off air, we're both going to say at the same time who we think it is. And we actually named the same person right off the bat. And this guy is a probably a billionaire, selling all these programs and has all these people under him, and he's just a robot, and it's just fake, and it's like he's acting on stage. There's no feeling. Or you'll get a lot of guys that are, I'll give you an example, like they haven't had experience with a certain topic. Like they've been a dad for a month, and all of a sudden they're dad experts. Yeah. Right. And I've had them trying to sell me. And I'm like, do you even know my story? Like, do you understand? Like, I've studied parenthood for the last 12 years. Like, I've read hundreds. Like, it's a difference. Like, I get DM'd. Actually, it was funny because you were talking about this. I had DM'd by a young entrepreneur on IG, and he's like trying to sell me. And I said, I go, how old are you? And he's like, oh, 24. I go, do a little research on me, and then come back to me and tell me if you want to still sell me. And then he came back like 2 days later, and he's trying to sell me again. I go, did you do any research on me? He's like, yeah, but I could take your business to 7 figures. And he's doing this whole spiel. And I go, I'm going to give you one more chance. Go do some research and come back to me and tell me what you think you could offer me. Came back 2 days later, same spiel. I could take your business to 7 figures. And I'm like, and I blocked them. And I'm like, it's just the same shit over and over and over and again. And I love that you don't do advertising. I love that you're being as real as you possibly can, because I think that comes across, and over the long haul, that's just going to build you as a brand. Do you do public speaking?
You know what? I've never done any official public speaking. I've got up in front, I've ran workshops, maybe 200 or 300 people where I get up and speak, but I've never got up and, at a 2,000 person event at a conference or anything. It's always been events that I've ran myself or I've been invited to, but they've been drumming related. So I get up and talk publicly, but it's, never been on a speaking circuit or anything like that.
This is something we're going to do together in 2021, because I've been
asked a few times,
and I want to get onto a couple stages, and I think I want to bring people along with us. Are you on Clubhouse already?
Yes.
Okay, so I started. I'm very strict with my time. Everything's blocked, so my schedule is everything to me, and my family comes first, and I'm very scheduled. So you could get very lost in Clubhouse. Okay, you could be on there and all of a sudden it's like 3 hours pass, and I refuse to allow that to happen. So what I do, I'm very precise. So I've created a group Saturday mornings, early Saturday mornings, which is a entrepreneurial hot topic of the week. And then I've created one for Sunday evenings, which would be 7 p.m. here, which would be probably around 12 o'clock your time Monday, because it's
Yep.
ahead. And it's a dad entrepreneur.
Cool.
So I've done two of those. And this past week, I partnered up with a guy that runs a podcast called Dad Up Podcast, very popular podcast, and Brian and I run it, and I moderate it, and it's just exploded. And all of a sudden, this past week, we had a guy named Sean Whalen, massive entrepreneur on. Brad Lee, you know who Brad Lee is?
No.
Go search him on IG. Massive. All of a sudden, we had these massive, like I'm talking about verified powerhouses that are legit businessmen all start jumping in the room and talking. And before we knew it, we had this massive conversation of like 15 guys on a panel, all these people listening. And as soon as we're done, I had to shut off. I run them for an hour, and it was almost at the 2-hour mark. And I'm like, guys, I'm closing this down for today. And everybody's like, no, but the conversation. I'm like, no, we're closing this down. We'll be back next week. And literally, as soon as I got off on IG, I got 19 messages thanking me for that.
Wow.
And it was, and I got 72 within like 2 minutes, 72 new followers on IG. And everybody kept messaging me because I ran it very strict where I said, no one's promoting themselves. No one's promoting their business. We're having an open conversation. So our topic for this week was balancing fatherhood and business.
Cool.
And that was it. And what I did was everybody talked, and then I kept letting everybody up on stage and tell their story. And I gave everybody a very moderated time. And it just went this open conversation. We had arguments, like some guys, like one guy, Sean Whalen, massive entrepreneur. And he has very much my values, which I appreciated. He's like, I go to boardrooms. He goes, if my son calls that meeting, I shut it down. I pick up that phone. I don't give a shit about them. If the guy across me doesn't want to do business with me because I'm talking to my kid, then you could F yourself. And I'm like, that's me. And then we had another guy come on. He's like, well, you got to learn how to separate family and business, and you have to teach your kids that. And I'm like, but you're not going to, as a moderator, you're just letting everybody talk. But in my head, and then they started arguing. It was just this great, deep conversation on father. It was epic.
Well, family and business are like this. I look at it like whatever happens in family flows into your business and vice versa. And I'm the same. I'll be in a call with a client, and the preschool that my son's at, the phone, they'll ring up. Okay, I got to go.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, if they don't understand that, cool, we're not the right fit. Like, my son comes first.
I love that. I'm 1,000% the same way. 1,000% the same way. So I appreciate that. I love that. There's two questions I ask every entrepreneur, and it's crazy is our conversation. We're just having a conversation. This is how I run all my podcasts is I just have an open conversation, and wherever it goes, it goes. And we've been at it for an hour yet, and it feels like we haven't even started talking, which I love. I have two questions because I actually have to get home soon too. It's already 3 p.m. here. I have two questions I ask every entrepreneur. If something were to happen to you today, your closest friends and relatives, how would you want to be remembered? In a few words.
Question. Really good question. I want to be remembered as a loving human, someone who gives up their time freely to those around them, and someone that listens. You know, I want them to think that they can come and talk to me and that I'm an open book and there'll be no judgment. I don't care for, hey, he did this and he wrote this and he made this much money. That doesn't define who I am, but being there, being a loving person, thoughtful, good listener, it's as simple as that for me.
I love it. Next, superpowers. You see Superman behind me. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
My superpower would be...
Dun.
You know what? I'm going to bring it back to my empathic listening. If I could be an empathic listener all of the time, to me, that's the greatest superpower. More of this and less of this. I mean, that to me is an epic superpower.
So that's a trait we should be teaching all our kids, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
I love it. I love it. Is there any last things you want to tell our audience?
Hey,
Anything
just
else
thank
you
you
want
for
to leave?
taking the time to listen. I mean, you're all very fortunate to have Jeff here running an amazing show. I'm honored to be a part of it. And if anybody wants to come and say hello, they can come and say hello over my Instagram, James Laughlin Official. And it'd be great to connect with you all.
I'm going to put on all our show notes how to get a hold of James. We're going to be looking for his book in 2021 to come out. I'm going to put a little pressure there to get his book out.
I'm buying yours when it comes out next week, buddy.
Yeah. And in general, just a good-hearted soul, honest, like I do these podcasts all the time, twice a week, and you can just tell when somebody's genuine and you're just a genuine soul. So I appreciate you and I appreciate everything you're doing. And your journey for impacting people has just started. there's a big journey ahead of you, and I can see you impacting a lot of people, and hopefully one day we'll be on stage together and talking and building our stories together. And that's one thing I want to leave this with you. And I don't know if I told you this last time. When I started this journey, with getting myself back into branding and building myself, there was one purpose. One purpose was to also get onto stage. And the reason I want to get onto stage, James, is I want to be able to build a platform for myself. So when my son's old enough, do we talk about this?
No.
I want my son to be on stage with me. When he's 18, 19, I want him to tell his story to the rest of the world, because I know his story is going to impact millions of people. And I want to be able to build this pathway so it'll be just an easy transition to get him on stage. So that's my goal, is over the next maybe 6 years to build enough of a stage presence that I could just bring him on stage and the whole world will be at his fingertips to tell his beautiful story. So that's one thing I want to do. And I think a lot of parents, if we could get our parents to be living their lives in a way, in a direction where they're trying to impact their kids every day, it'll be a more positive world and a less scary world, like you were talking about when we started this, and we're with the suicides and with the mental health and stuff like that, right? So it's understanding that and having that open dialogue. I'm going to dive one thing before you go, and this is pure going back to recircling your first conversation. How can I even word this? What advice would you give a parent if they have any inkling or feeling their children are in a dark place?
Great question. I think, I chatted to this former Prime Minister of New Zealand, and he set up a suicide department. I chatted to Dr. Warren Farrell, who wrote The Boy Crisis. If you haven't read it, guys, you've got to read it. So Dr. Warren Farrell, North American author, and consults to the White House and has done for many, many years on boys and men's health. So for that parent who's concerned, I think dialogue is the key here. And if you think of a young boy who's maybe struggling, get in a car and go for a drive. Don't sit face to face, or go for a walk up in the hills so you're both looking the same direction. Young boys tend to open up and share their feelings when they're not being confronted. So dialogue is the number one thing. Communication, setting those channels from a young age. I'm a big believer, if your kid screws up, like takes 6 eggs, smashes them on the kitchen floor when you're not looking, comes and says, "Hey, I smashed 6 eggs on the floor," I go, "High five. Well done. Thank you for telling me. Thank you for being honest. Now, let's go and clean it up together, and let's talk about maybe what we could do next time. That would be a better way to do it." So I think never punishing them for being honest. When they come to you and say, "I screwed up," or "I said this to the teacher, I swore at the teacher," like, it's probably going to happen, right? So don't scold them. Celebrate the fact that they're truthful, because when they are in a dark place, they're not going to come and tell you they're in a dark place if they've been scolded in the past for all these little minor infractions, like all these little things they've screwed up in, and they've came and told you, and you went, "Oh, well, that's awful. You shouldn't be doing that." They could be thinking, "I'm in a dark place. I don't want to tell mom and dad that, because they're going to be disappointed, angry, upset, and I shouldn't be doing it." So opening up dialogue, never punishing them for being honest. Yes, there's going to be consequences. If you do take the half a dozen eggs and smash them, you got to clean them up, and maybe there won't be any pocket money this week, or maybe there will be no, favorite TV program tonight. But letting them know that you love that there's honesty and you embrace it. And to me, that dialogue is everything.
I'm going to dive 2 things into that. One, I think that's very important when you're talking about if a child is honest enough to come to you and tell you a situation or something. I'm a strong believer, and I've done enough research that a lot of times they're crying for attention. Yeah. So if you do have a child that has done something and they're very openly to be ready to be scalded or be in trouble, sometimes they're actually crying for attention, and they're crying to tell you something else, and they don't know how to approach it. And I think as a parent, if we could start, and I've done this from day one, from a young age, opening up dialogue with your children. And this is one thing I'm very passionate, one thing I even put in my book is the importance of sitting down and having a meal with your family. And if you start this from a very young age and sit there and understand that meal time is talking time, not just sit there and eat, it's actually having an open conversation. How was your day? What was new today? What did you do differently? Had you have fun at school? What did your friends do? Just have an open dialogue. Because once you have that trust and you have that open conversation, that even if they say something dumb or something happened bad, you just laugh about it and have that open conversation during a meal, it just opens up. And I think it's so important to be doing that from a young age. And now that my daughter's in high school, my daughter sits in front of us and it's like, she'll sit there and be like, oh, my friend did this. And like, she's openly telling us these little teeny things, but not realizing she's doing it. It's just natural because it's an open dialogue conversation we continue every single day during dinner. And having that, we started that from a young age. Because if you start all of a sudden going to your child when they're 14 and 15 and being like, let's sit down, let's talk now. They'd be like, you haven't talked to me for 12 years. What do you want from me now? They're going to be a closed guard. So being able to start from a young age, if you still have that opportunity to start from a young age, I think that's fantastic. And if you don't, and you're for some particular reason, life got you, things happen, separate, whatever the course led for you not to have an open dialogue with your child. And you could do what James was saying, like going for a walk, going for a hike, putting them in a situation where they're not feeling confronted and being able to open up a dialogue. It's just having that communication. Figure out a way to open up that dialogue, whether you have to bring friends in the conversation, bring other friends to the platform, whatever the reason is, open up the dialogue because you never know what kids are thinking. And we just went through this past week. It's Bella's Talk Day in Toronto, Canada. So by the time this airs, will be a couple weeks in advance. But it's the mental health in this world right now with the pandemic, with kids being homeschooled, it's extraordinary. And the suicide rate, and it's something the damn government doesn't talk about, especially in Canada. They're all worried about the pandemic, but they're not talking about our suicide rate is up 60%, that all these numbers are coming in, and they're not talking about mental health. They're not talking about fitness and well-being and burning your stress and your anxiety through fitness or activities or family events. So I think it's something that we all as a society, as parents, have to be very vigilant in understanding and being very open with our children. I know I've probably talked more than you in this podcast, so I apologize. There's just a lot of topics that I'm very, very passionate about, right? So,
Loving it.
yeah, this has been a great conversation. Anything else you want to end it off with?
I just want to say a massive thank you and a big thank you to all the parents out there who are present, who are not perfect, but are trying, and they're showing up every day. They're pulling their socks up and they're saying, okay, well, how can I be a better parent today? How do I screw up a little less today than I did yesterday? I want to thank everyone out there who is a parent. And if you're not a parent and you're listening and your parents are still around, go and thank them.
Love that. I love that. We're going to end it off with that. Thank you so much, brother.
Thanks, man. Good to see you.